Hello, Uganda. Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hotseat on 933 KFM. I welcome you, our listeners across this beautiful land, the Pearl of Africa. My name is Partick. Tonight, we talk education, and I'm excited because my guest this evening is an educationist, a man who understands education more than I do. And so you and I suppose, we're going to be in class because we're going to understand education from a perspective of a man who has traveled across continents and taught many schools and different platforms and different classes. Let me introduce my guest because he's a professor, Professor Bismark Agbemble. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Patrick, thank you so much for having me here. Delighted.
Professor Agbemble, popularly known as Mr. Seal, Creator Elected One, is a seasoned educator with 17 years of experience and has taught in all levels of education from primary, secondary, and higher education. Professor Agbemble is a visiting scholar from the United States of America as an English language fellow through the U.S. Mission and is hosted at Chambogo University. In the USA, Professor Bismark Agbemble is known to be passionate and committed educator who promotes practical and innovative methods to instructional delivery and classroom management. Professor Agbemble has devoted the rest of his professional career to working with policymakers, educators, and civil society to rethink education in Africa and intentionally training and building sustainable institutions and human resource capacity to prepare this youthful population to not only be employed, but to be deployed into the global world for impact and service to humanity. I can tell you, I just read just a fraction of Professor Bismark Agbemble's profile, and I'm sorry I could not read the whole of it, but I hope you will just allow me to just stop there.
Oh, Patrick, it's okay. Thank you so much for having me here today. So delighted to be here. And I had a chance to also read about your background.
You did?
The great work, yes. As alumni of a fellowship program at Jackson State University in Mississippi.
Oh, yes, I was at Jackson State University.
Yes.
Which made me feel like I was in Nigeria.
Absolutely. And you're a trailblazer, and so thank you so much for having me. And also your producer, Stephen, for bringing such a very dynamic, timely topic that I hope that today will make it a very useful topic for parents, policymakers, and also educators to really rethink education.
Okay, rethink education. Let me, I don't know where to begin, but I'm going to look at education from three dimensions.
Yes.
Education to know, education to do, and education to live with others. You know, education to do with your hands,
yes.
Education to know with your mind, and maybe education to be able to live with others.
Absolutely.
When you look at Uganda, because you've been attached to Chambogo University,
yes,
for many years, this country, especially in the 60s and 70s, you could say that was our golden era as far as education was concerned. Somebody would get out of the university, and you could see, I'm told, they were good enough. They could practically be employed anywhere in the world, take them anywhere, and they would hit the ground running. Somehow nowadays, people are saying, we are getting through education, we are having degrees, but most of our graduates are unemployable. If you were to analyze Uganda's education system, what is great about Uganda and what is lacking in Uganda?
Oh, wonderful. And I will start with a Chinese word. In the Chinese language, the same word that they have for crisis is the same word they have for opportunity. So they see every crisis as an opportunity. So within the context of the Ugandan education system, I have to be very reserved because I haven't been here long enough to be able to diagnose, but many of my colleagues have written papers and research, and I can summarize it in a very short phrase. The challenges that we're having is we put more emphasis and more priorities on certificates over skills. We need to re-engineer the education structure. So therefore we can focus on developing skills over certificates. That's number one. That's the challenge. But you also have to understand the times that we're in right now. Mark Twain is an amazing American writer. He says, don't let education get in the way of learning. So I think Uganda has this amazing opportunity of a lifetime to infuse technology, practical skills, and at the end of the day, how are we developing our young scholars? I don't call them students. I call them scholars to have practical skills that can be ready for the workforce. So through my short data that I have in Uganda educational system, 1, opportunity and funding. 2, infrastructure, the lack of infrastructure. And 3, making sure that we are equipping our educators from primary, secondary to university with 21st century skill. Because I have something that I say at Chambogo University all the time. There's a phrase in education that says teachers produce who they are and teach what they know. So in short, the educational system must be looked at from a holistic perspective. I rather want to focus today more on the opportunities we have to transform, because we've been having this narrative that we are producing graduates that are not meeting the 21st century skill. And today I want to go in some data that I have, some research, and those what I have seen.
Professor Agbemble, you come to Uganda at the best of the moment times, because we have been trying to change our curriculum.
Yes.
And it's supposed to be more practical related kind of education, which I think speaks the kind of education you want to happen.
Absolutely.
But when you look at it, skills related, sharpening and honing the skills of the Ugandan learner, where do you place a teacher who has not been prepared to carry out that kind of education that can create a person of skills? Because they are from a theoretical kind of background, and you want them to teach practical skills, and yet they don't have that kind of training.
And Patrick, that's a phenomenal question that you just asked. And that is the challenge. That is the elephant in the room that we're not having. So let me give you 3 areas of how to address your question directly. Looking at the profession as an educator, it's either a job, a career, or a calling. Many a times you're getting individuals into the profession of education and this just becomes a job, which I call just over broke. That's what a job stands for, just over broke. So we have to come back into the profession and retool, provide professional development that can translate directly into the classroom. That's the elephant in the room. Like, how do we recruit?
How do you retool them?
Okay, may I be a nerd for a moment? I have an educational background. We can talk forever. So in retooling, we break it in 3 different areas: structural, functional, and cyclical. Structural unemployment or structural employment is where people are displaced. I was having a conversation with Stephen when I was in the holding room, and he said something very powerful. At the primary level, he had an interest in journalism, and he groomed himself from primary all the way through university. So imagine an educator that's coming to the classroom that this is not their profession. So therefore, you're going to get lax results. So as policymakers, if looking from all the gamut of civil society, how do we really think about the reprofession of education? Getting the right people, retaining them, and most importantly, making sure that they become lifelong learners in their classroom, so that therefore they can produce the products that we want, which are functional 21st century students.
If you are able to identify the right people to be in the class, you should be able to pay them well, retain them there. To be able to do that, that means you're giving them a salary, and off that salary, they can have something to eat, they can have something to invest, and maybe they can have something to save. But when you look at the salary of a Ugandan teacher, it is so meager that it may not give them the urge to continue, the passion to teach, and that competitive age.
Yes, you know, Stephen, you hit on something on the nail, making them competitive. So think about our lawyers, our doctors, our professional class, if I can use that term. They were trained by a teacher. A teacher had to teach them 1 + 1 was 2, A, B, C, D. So numeration is a different conversation that I can't go into detail because I don't have so much data to support. But we have to do a better job of having a national conversation around how do we recruit, how do we compensate. And this phenomenon you're talking about, the lack of pay,
I'm wondering why, Professor Agbemble,
it's a global phenomenon.
I wonder how you missed the issue of enumeration, because every year in this country, there are protests. There are teachers who are putting down their tools because of matters of pay. So it's fundamental.
I couldn't agree more, and we cannot disregard that conversation. It's part of the center parts of the ecosystem of making sure that teachers are motivated. And sometimes numeration, not sometimes, all the time, it's very, very important that numeration is at the centerpiece of the conversation. Skills development, is at the centerpiece of the conversation, and also creating a conducive environment for the teachers to thrive. So it has to be on three legs that we do both equally, because like juggling three balls in the air, right? We can't lose focus on one side. You can pay a teacher really, really great enumeration, but is there motivation there to really do the work? That's a question we have to ask ourselves. So I think in that conversation, you're 100% right. We have to look at that holistically.
I know you've been looking at the education policy for Uganda. You've been looking at the numbers and the data.
Yes.
But how does it compare with other countries, especially when education in the marketplace?
Yeah.
Education in the marketplace.
Absolutely.
And sometimes the government has not been as robust as possible to tell whoever is a businessman and you want to make money from the education, you have to put all the requirements.
Yes.
So somebody will start a school in what was supposed to be an apartment block. It is hardly not a very good environment for school, but it's there. So you cannot develop your co-curricular. Yes. You don't have where children can play from. It's not conducive. But, this is education in the marketplace.
And it has become a business.
Yes.
And
not a good business anyway.
Phenomenal. And at the expenses that our children are not getting the best service, and we're going to pay for that. I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues, Dr. Watulu at Chambogo University. And we were talking about how do we really relearn to unlearn. And that's a phrase that's buzzing in education. And then he asked me the same question around, look, from a global perspective, how is it being done in the U.S. and other best practices, even within the sub-region, the East Bloc. In the U.S., let me give you this data since you asked for it. Every $1 that we invest in education, we get $4 back. So for those that are the math whiz that are listening to this discussion, that's a 400% return on your investment. So
that's phenomenal.
So thank you. I couldn't agree more. So therefore, it is imperative that we invest in education, both teachers, students, infrastructure, technology, because it's the surest investment that will yield the most return, because an educated population will pay taxes, better drivers on the road, become entrepreneurs if they have skills and resources. So I really believe that we must invest heavily in education, and that's other parts of the world is just a best practice. You must invest in education to get the long-term return.
This is what happens because of the commercialization of education in Uganda. Schools will be competing really hard. And in this competition sometimes, they will try to cut corners because you want to get flying colors or good grades. And at the end of the day, there will be more practice. Somebody will try to cut corners so that school A will look that everybody passed with grade A. Yes. So that in the following year, all the parents will be trying to get their children admitted in that school. And yes, when you look at for example, the academic papers of the children,
absolutely,
they look absolutely wonderful.
Correct.
But when you want to speak to them one-on-one, they just don't correlate. You find somebody with excellent, CV, but they can't even express themselves. They can't even write grammar. Or just a few skills like values. They're lacking in values. And that's where we are.
And Patrick, and this phenomenon that you echoed, I think it goes back to the first statement that you and I made. Are we in the business of skills development in the area of listening skills, speaking skills, reading skills, and writing skills? These are the four major pillars that you need in the 21st century. Everything else you can find online. Or are we more in what we call self-aggrandizement of just certificates, but it's like a mushroom, right? It's big on the outside, but hollow on the inside. That's back to that conversation. As a society, what are we valuing? Are we valuing rhetoric, theory, or people that can roll up their sleeves and prepare students of the future that can solve problems? And we have a framework for that. We call that project-based learning. And that's why I've devoted almost the last 7 years of my professional life researching, trying to implement, because these are the skills. Because if you ask corporate, Uganda, let me give you a case study. Since you went to the U.S., I think you may be familiar with a company called Walmart.
Yes.
And Amazon.
Yes.
Walmart employs 2.1 million people. Now you can go online, some say it's 3 million, but give and take. For the lower part of the tier, let's talk about 2.1 million. Amazon employs 1.5 million. Tell me how many Ugandan companies that you can list on one hand that employs more than 200,000 people.
None.
Okay. So what are we producing? You're producing individuals that have certificates, but not skills.
Professor Bismark Agbemble, hold on your points because we're going to take a break and the hot seat will be right back.
The hottest debate on all relevant topics live on KFM's Hot Seat tonight. KFM's Hot Seat covers all the relevant topics every weekday, 7 to 8 p.m.
Welcome back to 933 KFM, and this is the Hot Seat. My name is Partick. My guest tonight is Professor Bismark Agbemble, an educator from the United States. He's been in Uganda understanding the Ugandan education system, and from a vantage position, he's able to see where the weaknesses are and where the opportunities are. And he says in a crisis, there's also an opportunity there.
Yes.
But, the crisis I see, there has been a revolution of building so many technical or vocational institutions in Uganda.
Yes.
But when you visit them, you'll find the technology they're trying to use in those vocational institutions is obsolete. And sometimes you wonder, you find, machines of 1970, of 1980, totally obsolete. And that's where they're trying to teach students on. And I wonder, products or graduates of such institutions may not be able to compete on the global scale. And that scares me, even though it appears now the Ugandan parent and the Ugandan government, we are beginning to understand that its skills, a kind of education is what we need. We may not have the tutors to give us those skills, but also we do not have the infrastructure for where students learn from. And that's a problem.
100%. And we see it as an opportunity, right? We see it as an opportunity. And you're 100% right. And it goes, again, there's nothing new under the sun, right? It comes back to where your priorities are is what you put your resources, right? So let me give you a Chambogo case study. So at Chambogo University, our vice chancellor is a phenomenal leader, and he really believes in the power of entrepreneurship and making sure our students have skills. And I'm housed our what we call TTE, Technical Teacher Education Sector. And if you come to that sector, you see our young men and women being able to do fabrication, being able to weld for private sector. Right, and I did my research before I came on your show. Jackson State University, their endowment, I'm going to connect my story in a moment, their endowment is about $48 million. Wow. And then other universities, about $3 billion plus. But the major contributor to their endowment are the alumni, right? The alumni that see value in the skills they got at the university, now they're donating back. Now link that conversation to Uganda institutions. What are we producing of value that the students are going into the workforce as an entrepreneurs or as a workplace to be able to give back? So the point I'm making here, it's good business for universities to ensure that they equip. Chambogo University has state-of-the-art facility. If you walk in, it is state-of-the-art. So I don't know if I can just position that with McCurry and other universities, but from what I have experienced at Chambogo University, they are moving in the right direction because of priority and leadership. If you do that, you can be able to equip, resource the centers, so therefore they can be able to practice. In closing, here's the biggest challenge, again, that we are facing in the area of skills development as an English language program. We try to provide technical skills in reading and writing. What I have discovered, Patrick, is there's a big disconnect between the skills that private sector says they need versus what we are producing. So what I call in my research is called reverse engineering. How do we come back and have the private sector at the table? You will be surprised. You can get a manufacturing company in Uganda to donate those equipments because that's their future workforce. So I think there's a small space that we can hijack the conversation to bring the private sector to the conversation around vocational training. Because those are the students that are going to say, you know what, if you hire an engineer, yes, it's nice they know Shakespeare. But at the end of the day, are you a good structural engineer? Are you a good mechanical engineer? Can you do the work? You can quote Shakespeare all you want. By the end of the day, what skill are you bringing?
There has been a shift, a deliberate shift from the government of Uganda to focus on science education more. Yeah. Actually, even the teachers of science, if you understand, are paid more than the art students. Absolutely. I mean, the art teachers. But earlier you talked about to put your money where your priorities are.
Absolutely. Good point.
This is more theoretical. This is more in words. Because let's face it, there is something called capitation grant.
Yes.
Some little money from the central government that goes to almost every child in public school. But when you look at how much is given per term, maybe it comes about $1.
Yes.
$1 United States for a term. If you maybe compute that in a day, I don't know how much pence it is. So this is not putting your resources where your priorities are. It appears, I don't know how to have been able to find, the government of Uganda is unable to walk the talk.
You know, and that's a structural challenge, right? And when you're talking about educational framework, I don't know if you have any children, right? I have two.
I do.
And I can't keep up anymore. Gen Z, Gen Y, I can't keep up. So every 20 years or so, give and take, there's a new generation that are coming in. And I think from a policy perspective, which I don't want to comment too much on that, right? It's not in my space of work that I do.
I thought you were a policy analyst.
Yes. Yeah, but a practical analyst, right? A practical analyst that is taking what I call in my classroom, use what you have. Being able to create an environment that is conducive and be able to impact policy where you can from a practical side of it. So there's a theoretical policy, which we call national curriculums, based on priorities of a nation. That to me is very what I call the macro. The micro is what all of us as parents, as educators, as community leaders all have an impact. Is how do we go back to the basic, which is, okay, at the end of the day, the environment that I'm giving, if it's a classroom, if it's in Gulu, if it's in Ginger, wherever you are, how do you take the policy that's been given to you and translate it into small bites that can yield results in 4 pillars, which I've already echoed. And for me, I think that's what I get excited when I analyze the Uganda educational platform. We can have a conversation about policy, but that's structural. That's 20, 15 years down the line for you to see the results. In Economics 101, we call it lag time. Right? Any policy you make, it takes about 18 months to be able to see the impact if it's implemented with fidelity. But if you're able to localize, and I was talking to the president of ULELTA, his name is Hillary, and he made a very powerful statement, is that, we all know this, is a proverb, a child's first teacher is the parent, the community, and then the school. So at every stage, what are we doing to add these 4? The ability to speak well, ability to write well, ability to actually read, and so forth. And that, to me, I get excited about that because I think parents, communities can really get behind what is the core skills that we're looking for. From literacy, especially on the media side, financial literacy, and at the end of the day, the most phenomenal one.
So where do we put the issue of values? Honesty, fidelity, integrity, working with others, respect. Because you are not going to find them in a Ugandan class. But if I'm going to meet Professor Agbemble, these are the things I want to find in them so that I can be able to work with them.
Patrick, I believe you have a future in education.
Not really.
Yes, I believe you should leave journalism. And Stephen, I hope you forgive me for this. I'm still in one of your best hosts because those are what we call life skills. Yeah. Those are transferable skills. And remember, leadership, if I can give you a leadership quote, leaders are a reflection of the society. So these values should become non-negotiable of time management, integrity, right? Core values that we all can agree on, that this is what's going to move an educational institution forward. So for those things, you can't legislate morality. Let me say that again.
You can't.
You can't legislate morality. It is something that a nation and a culture have to believe that this is what we stand for.
But that will be a nation that has some kind of national values. They say, this is our set of values. But for the Ugandan case,
but we do know.
I think it's none.
No. I want to challenge that a little bit. I want to challenge that from the educators that I have had a chance to work with. Some of my colleagues, like Anne at the U.S. Embassy. And I believe the environment that you create, and I remember in my introduction, I used a term I call students scholars. Then I don't use the word teacher in my classroom when I'm lecturing. I call them nation builders. I'm very intentional about that. I say, don't ever call yourself semantically. I understand you're a teacher semantically. That's a title. but you are a nation builder. So remember what I said, teachers teach what they know. They produce who they are. So if we want to talk about this, what we call soft skills, we have to be deliberate and be able to find and recruit and retain, I'm back to those words again, and create a conducive environment where teachers can bring out these values. Instead of a child getting an A, but if a child is respectful, if a child is kind, and what we call social emotional learning, which is trending in education, let's put more values on that. Because you can walk into MTN tomorrow for a job. If you can't get to work on time because you have poor time management, you'll be fired. If you don't have integrity, you'll be fired. If you're not a team player, you'll be fired. If you're not flexible, you'll be fired. If you're not adaptable, you'll be fired. But you can say, well, I graduated top of my class. It doesn't matter. What really sustains an organization is their values.
Professor Bismark, Agbemble, we're going to take a break. When we come back, let's look into the role of technology in class and how does that maybe be of benefit or a challenge to the Ugandan teacher.
And then we will link that to PBL. Thank you so much.
KFM's Hot Seat. It's hot. It's live, provocative, and digs deep into the issues. It's KFM's Hot Seat.
Welcome back. Welcome back to 933 KFM, and this is the Hot Seat. My name is Partick. Kamara. My guest this evening is an educationist from the United States, Professor Bismark Agbemble. You know, earlier we talked about the Ugandan curriculum, and I'm sure you have looked into it because there has been a change. Mm-hmm. So, is that it? Is that the one? and maybe will give us the change that we desire.
That's why I'm smiling year to year, right? And I'm a history nerd, so I don't know how much you follow American history. On when the first presidential debate, and I'll link this for and tell you it was a game changer. That's the key word. In the first televised debate for a presidential election in the United States was between Nixon and JFK.
Okay.
When you're on radio,
in the 60s.
Yeah, you're on the radio. Everybody looks phenomenal on radio, right? Because you can't see their face, and people were able to see Nixon sweating, and then JFK was a very handsome man, very articulate, and I think that kind of tilted the presidency to him. So the TV being broadcast debate became a game changer in that election. So that's a little bit of U.S. history facts there. That's the same thing for Uganda. I truly believe the lower secondary adopting project-based learning, which is a framework of a pedagogy that tells you that, you know what, we want life skills, the same type of skill of collaboration, creativity, critical thinking that every organization is dying for. We want our children to be able to practice that and create a product.
At an early age.
At an early age. And that's what they have adopted on top of the competency-based structure. So I am all 100% in that this is a game changer.
A game changer, like you call it.
Yes.
Are the tutors prepared to do this?
So just like anything, right? It is something that you work at. It's something that you refine, you evaluate, you monitor. So we just have to be a little bit patient, right?
So there's going to be a generation that won't benefit that much, that won't be so much refined. Will miss out on something.
I'm an optimist. No, so now it comes back to the nation builder, the felicitator in the classroom. Do we go from the traditional approach where the teacher is a custodian of knowledge, or do we create a different environment where it's a student-centered approach, which is PBL? So you're not going to miss much if educators become very obsessed with thinking that this is an opportunity to be a game changer for our educational system. Resource it well, put the proper investment in there, which is the training, numeration, resources, and that's what our office has been focused on.
So this learner-based kind of education,
yes.
How does it play out in the era of technology, in the era of a lot of information out there? Because if the teacher is not smart enough, the teacher can find hard time in class.
And that's for bad educators. If you're a bad teacher, you're not going to embrace technology because it will expose your weaknesses. But a great educator will find a way to infuse technology into the learning experience. So let me give you two case studies. So we built what we call a PBL model classroom at two schools, and I didn't have their permission to mention their name, so I'm going to hold their name for a moment. And they're government schools. When we went in there, we resourced the school, part of the English language program. We provided teaching aid. We provided training, one-on-one training with a particular teacher to infuse. And at this particular school, we did an exercise. We asked the kids, we're teaching English, pronoun, verb, you name it, figurative language.
Wait a minute, Professor Gamble.
Yes.
As an American, your pronoun game has actually been totally changed. You know what I mean?
Yes.
In some cases, you're no longer he, they're no longer she, they are they.
Right.
What kind of pronoun are you even talking about?
But we're talking about...
You know what I mean?
Yes, we're talking about they and them, right?
Now you're talking about they and them.
Yes.
You know, in America, you guys are losing the pronoun game.
Right, but that's a different conversation.
But, no.
but for the Ugandan context, right, we're talking about them being able to know the grammar structure of pronouns. And to me, I think that's more important.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And so, but the kids were able to infuse the little technology that we had. And I use the word little in quotation. We had a tablet and a phone. And we were able to research on the spot. So when people talk about technology, I always say use what you have. Having a smart board, not all our schools will have resources to have a smart board that will be able to move the slides back and forth. But we could be able to equip ourselves, even if it's one laptop, even if it's one tablet, even if it's a smartphone, we can leverage technology as long as our kids, because as you know, you can have one phone that's an iPhone with 128 gigabytes. That could be more powerful than 5 desktops or 2 laptops. So we have to redefine what technology is. Technology is a tool that enables and enhances learning. It's not the all, but the advantage. Let me give you a case study. In the U.S., an average American child, let's say on the East Coast, has never seen a coconut tree in their life. But they have an amazing smart board. They haven't seen a plantain. They haven't seen even a goat or a chicken running around. So we can infuse what we can research around the world, but equally use what we have locally to enhance the learning in the classroom. So technology is like a double-edged sword. We have to manage it. And even if it's just pure basic, provide something that can allow our students to have a window to the global world.
Technology can be the greatest equalizer.
Yes.
If it is available on both sides. If a child in Gulu is exposed to technology,
yes,
he can do well like a child in Ghana.
Yes.
A child in New York can do as well like a child in Nakapiripiriti,
yes,
so long as all of them have better technology.
Yes.
The problem is that sometimes what we have is rudimentary.
Yes.
What we have may not be, top of the range, or maybe what is state of the art, like you want to call it.
Yes.
I'll give you an example of the biology class, practical class of biology.
Yes.
In many Ugandan students fail biology, but I think it is because of the lack of tools to use to do practical lessons.
Yes.
If you're going to dissect maybe a frog or a rat or something like that, you'll have to acquire materials to use. And after you've done your biology lesson, practical lesson, you'll have to discard that. Mm-hmm. But for a school that is private and you have to buy these things, and yet you're using them once, and then you are throwing them away, there's a cost to it. So somehow students will miss out because the business person who owns the school will find it hard to go and buy materials to use for a biology practical lesson because they're trying to avoid a cost. Mm-hmm. And that's a challenge.
And now I know, Patrick, you're the interviewer, but I have a question for you.
I'm not used to answering questions, but we can try.
If you had $1 billion to allocate to education, what areas would you put it and why? And I'm going to build off my question with an answer.
I think honing the skill of the educator, mm-hmm, and giving them the infrastructure they deserve.
Mm-hmm. And what outcome would you expect from it?
A scholar that can compete anywhere in the world.
Okay. Let me tell you a secret.
Mm-hmm.
You can have all the most amazing infrastructures in the world. Other countries have it. You can allocate as much money in the U.S. We spend $800 billion in our educational system. What? $800 billion. And we're a $3 trillion economy. And
we're almost $1 trillion in education.
Yes. But we are phenomenal when it comes to the creative space, ingenuity. The Ugandan child is capable to compete with any single child in the world. And I can prove with data. As long as you invest in primary education, give them the basic resources, the ingenuity that a typical Ugandan child has, it's unmatched to some other developed nation that has so much resources. So we're not that off as long as we get the basics right, which in my humble opinion, support educators as much as you can. But have a policy and invest in the policy that is very clear on what direction you want to go. Let me give it to you 2 case studies, okay? If you go to India, India is very, very clear where they want to compete in the world when it comes to IT. If you take the Indian market, right, they want to make sure that their kids are the best in STEM. The CEO of Google is an Indian. The CEO of MasterCard is an Indian. If you go to MIT right now, some of the best are coming from India. They made it very, very clear. So where's our strength? The agriculture sector employs more people in Uganda than any other sector. So why can't we rope technology, education policy, project-based learning around sustainability? Our children can compete because of the 21st century leapfrog that we have. I told you I have a daughter. My daughter has never seen a typewriter in her life. So she doesn't need to see a typewriter. I can give her a smartphone. And then she just leapfrogged a desktop, a laptop. That's where Uganda is right now. As long as we don't lose our value system, ensure that we are equipping the right educators in the classroom with that life skill that you mentioned earlier, we have a bright chance. I am more optimistic.
It's good to talk about the value system, but value system of different nations differ. In fact, what Professor Agbemble talks about, understand as values from the Western or American perspective, are no values in Uganda. You know that. But I don't want to get into that.
But they're universal. They're universal values of love, peace, kindness.
Yeah,
those are universal.
If we dig deep into that,
those are universal. And we can wrap that in education because you educate the entire child. You do. Body, mind, and spirit.
We're gonna take a quick break, and so we come back with our last segment of our discussion. And if my producer allows, I'm going to allow maybe 2 or 3 calls so that we get to hear what Ugandans are thinking. And so you too, who's listening, you can have your say. We'll
Thank you so much, Mr. Patrick.
KFM's Hot Seat. It's hot. It's live, provocative, and digs deep into the issues. It's KFM's Hot Seat. Hot Seat. Hot Seat. Hear the real story behind the story. Coming right at you. Only on 933 KFM.
Welcome back to 933 KFM, and this is the Hot Seat. My name is Partick. Kamara. My guest tonight is an educationist, a wonderful man from the United States. And he loves education, speaks about education with a lot of passion. And so I just want you also to have your say. Let me just try to read out the numbers you can call and tell us what you think about Uganda's education system and perhaps what we're missing or what we have right. It looks like Professor Agbemble is an optimistic man. He thinks we will get there. So 0751 933 900. Let me repeat that. 0751 933 900 or 0701 933 934. Let's have those callers coming. I have a call online. Hello.
Good evening, Patrick.
Good evening. Go right ahead with your question or comment and make it very brief, sir.
Yes, you're talking to a Code. And first of all, the professor, I agree with him. But currently, the education system is a mess. Because it's a big structure. Look at even the teachers themselves. It's a big issue. Look at the infrastructure. It's not about the students going to class and they learn what the new curriculum has come about. But it's a very big issue concerning the society and everyone to be part of it. However, when are we going first of all to handle the teachers themselves with this new curriculum? But up to now, there are some who are not aware of that, of the new curriculum. And it's becoming a big issue.
Okay, thank you very much. Make a call there. Let me pick another caller online. I have a caller. Hello.
Yes, hello. Hello.
From, and please go right ahead with your question or comment. Make, sir.
Okay, I thank you so much for Professor. I just wanted the Professor to understand the the way the education background in Uganda, where teachers are classified. You find the science teachers are paid different, and the art teachers are paid different. So how can somebody concentrate on education really? I wanted him to comment for us on that.
All right. Thank you very much. Professor Agbemble will respond to that. Let me also maybe take just two more. I have another caller online. Hello. Hello. Maybe I'm going to pick another call online. Hello. I have a call online. Hello. In the moment, probably Professor Agbemble, if you can just go for those two, and then we can carry it from there.
Absolutely, and I'll keep my remark really, really short. And absolutely, I have experienced a classroom size of 80. Some of my teachers that we are trained at Chalmers University will tell me that they have a classroom size of 150, and that's a challenge, right? And again, I'm back to my cop-out answer. So how does a nation, because in the Bible, for those that are believers, from the Christian perspective, it says, without vision, the people will perish. Once the nation has a very clear vision of what the education policy of the outcome that we're looking for, will shape and mold how we build our institutions, what infrastructure we provide. Because we know what the outcome is. And I think right now we are theoretically saying that we want students that are 21st century skills ready. But are we actually invested in making sure they come out with 21st century skills? And where are we putting them? So it's like really our policy and implementation, it's not on the same alignment. And I think I am an optimist because let's focus on what we can focus on. We can never have a better past, but we can have a better future if we take one step at a time. That's the first one. So that's a very theoretical answer to that because that's something that we can't control within a short period of time. Number two, numeration. And I'm back to that same premise. Looking at science teachers being paid more because we want to recruit for STEM, I understand that, but we have to have an equitable playing field, right? It has to be inclusive, it has to be equitable because that teacher that's teaching English or that's teaching social studies is teaching a future scholar. We shouldn't put one over the other because all of them are equal. Because now you can go from STEAM to STEM. STEAM provides the science, technology, education, the arts, and then mathematics. The creative industry is the future. It's called authentic. Everything that you see and touch, somebody had to create it with their imagination and an element of creativity. So that's why I'll leave that. So it should be an equitable platform.
Okay, well, you can have those calls come in and perhaps maybe have a conversation with Professor Bismark Agbemble on the education in Uganda, where we have it right and where we have it wrong.
Yes.
The good note is that Professor Agbemble is very optimistic that probably the path that we're taking is right. And the areas of values are key. I have a caller online.
Yes, this is here in Newta. Thank you, KFM. Mine is I want to extend appreciation to Professor for really telling the Ugandan teachers to use what they have, like SPBA and the new curriculum as the future of the Ugandan education system. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. That's his appreciation, Professor Agbemble. I have another caller online. Hello. So good evening.
Hello?
Yes, good evening. What's your name and where are you calling from? You can...
Hello?
Yes. The one more caller. Hello.
Yes, hello. This is Kawaya Chigongo calling. Education is based on energy, that is electricity. Don't you think it will be education for some? Okay, not all students have smartphones, don't have electricity in the villages. Don't you think you'll be teaching some people and leaving others behind? Anyhow, there is a school called Digital School on the line, registered by Mr. Madila. Check it out. Thank you so much for the guest. I am impressed.
Okay, thank you very much. You know, we're talking about accessibility of these technologies, electricity, for example, that if you go online and, you know, these technologies, some people will be left behind. How do we also bring them on board? I think that's what he's trying to say.
Absolutely. And Patrick, Nelson Mandela said this: education is the greatest equalizer, or education is the massive weapon that we can use to change the world. He also equally said something that was very profound. And he said, a nation that does not invest, I'm paraphrasing this quote a little bit, that does not invest in education doesn't have a future. I'm snapping my fingers.
So we have to my producer saying I take one more caller. I have a caller line. Hello.
Hello.
Your name and where you're calling from, and please be very brief.
Santongo Henry, Nigeria. Yeah, I would like to appreciate the guest. But then I have one thing to comment about. In Uganda, we have a problem. Like the guest said earlier, we really look forward to getting good grades. But then, there is a problem that we find it difficult as the teachers to strike a balance between imparting skills among the learners, but then also getting good grades. So you find yourself as a teacher that you have to push yourself on the side of getting the good grades, but then you fail to strike a balance for the time you need to spare to impart the skills among the learners.
All right, thank you very much. In the interest, I think we're running out of time. Let me also give you an opportunity, Professor Agbemble, to give us your concluding remarks.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I want to thank the Chomogo University, the staff there, the opportunity of a lifetime to be able to collaborate with world-class lecturers and the student body. I want to commend all of them because all they have taught me is what I have echoed here. It's been a team effort. And then, Stephen, thank you for this opportunity again. And Kwesi and Patrick, I want to give you flowers. I have a colleague of mine, and she's always talking about flowers. And I want to practice a little bit of the Ugandan I have learned, Webale. So I want to really thank you for this delightful discussion that we had. But I want to leave you with a quote. And it's a quote that has understood education, because the word education is a Latin word that means educe, which means to pull out. That's education. And the quote simply says, we are responsible for the effort, not the results. As a society, we must take ownership in educating the entire child, both the boy child and the girl child, and understand these practical skills that we can give them in three areas, in short. Learning skills, literacy skills, and life skills. And yes, we have challenges with infrastructure. Yes, we have challenges with lack of teachers trained and motivated. Yes, I do. But the one thing that you can never take away from a true educator is their spirit to make an impact using what they have. And to me, I think that's what makes Uganda an amazing country, a Uganda that has a bright future. And then we can have a conversation on policy. That's another day conversation. But I'd rather focus on what can we do as individuals, because each one reach one. Because we can educate every single child that we see with life skills, and we can never go wrong, and that's the secret sauce.
Professor Bismark Agbemble, passionate educationist, I want to thank you so much for having honored our invitation to be here. You have added value to our platform, and I hope you'll be able to come again. And for those of you who have been listening to this program, I want to thank you for the privilege of your company. This brings us to the end of tonight's edition of the Hotseat, and coming up on the top of the hour is Catherine Ageno with the news of the day.